Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to begin by giving all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rechakodash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostle of Brimstone, and enough respect to the brothers that they're pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, I wanted to do a quick lesson on the book of 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter. And Lord willing, this be edifying. This is actually a continuation of a series called Repent and Do the First Works. And this will be the 3rd chapter. I guess, or at least the third part. So, the book of 1 Peter, the chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. It says, "Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also without the word be warned by the conversation of the wife." Now, from the first verse alone, you can tell that it's going to be focusing on the women, and as a woman in this truth, there isn't a lot really that's required of a woman rather than, composure. And what I mean by that is, like a man is expected to actually go out into the highways and the byways and prophesy and speak the word and, spread it and take on that responsibility of that labor. But it's not so for a woman. A woman does not have to carry that burden, which I guess burden was not, for lack of a better word, a burden, which really it isn't. But so it says, while they and on yeah, okay, so so I was gonna say, and that being the case, how women aren't really expected to go up above and beyond like men do. Oftentimes, when you hear this gospel, and as time goes on, you may have you are much more likely to become complacent and grow distant from the fundamentals of the ministry of in Yahushai, right? Because if you are if it was required of you to do videos every day and go into the scriptures and go onto the highways and the byways, the odds are the scriptures live in you, right? And you think on the Lord day in and day out, and you think on composure and so on and so forth. But when you're not required to do all these things, oftentimes it's actually very likely that you grow away, or at least distance yourself unintentionally from the gospel. And so that is why I think the book of 1 Peter is the 3rd chapter, and Yahushai knew why he put Peter as the foundation of the church, because chapters like this. Okay, and so a lot of times, brothers will have noticed, whether it's like women that they're dealing with, where they will say they're in the truth, but then they're not, wholly in the truth, especially when it comes to the subject of what being submissive. That they always have a problem with that, right? And they always like to, I guess, they always like to tiptoe around a man and try to lead and try to test and and try to do all kinds of things, everything they would try, but be submissive. And and even sometimes too, it tells you that you may be in an unfortunate situation where you have to submit to a man that really lacks wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. That's why it says, be in subjection to your own husband, even if they obey not the word, right? Sometimes you're gonna be in the situations where you are with a man who just lacks wisdom. You just know that he's just not right in the mind. And unfortunately, there are some women in there that are caught up in situations like that. And, understandably, you may feel as though you got to maybe just take charge and, call him a no good for nothing or a deadbeat, or try to step your way around it. But, here, Peter, makes it known, or he makes it clear actually how you're supposed to behave in such manner. And really, when you think about it, it's actually very difficult, right? Not, I know I made the statement at first that, women do not have to do as much as men, but I believe that if you're in a situations where you have to follow a foolish man, that's a very heavy burden that you actually have to carry and go through with it, and it's marriage, man, till death do you apart. And yeah, it's actually a very, very difficult thing to do. But let's hear the words of Peter concerning how you ought to react, because while you may not be vested with the responsibility of going out to the highways and the byways, you are expected to magnify the Lord in your conversations. And that's the focus of this chapter, right? How you behave, your composure, your mannerisms, your morality. Okay, everything about you as a woman should magnify Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Okay, so it says, while they behold your chaste conversations coupled with fear, because when they see how unique and how you comport yourself, it says that it's actually very likely that they may be won over, right? And so it says, while they behold your chaste conversations coupled with fear. And amen, a lot of men have gone to the dark side because of women. They've dealt into witchcraft. They've gone into all these different religions, and they've actually left the Lord for women. And so this is actually very likely. So it says, whose adorning let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and wearing of gold and of putting on apparel. This isn't forbidding you to adorn yourself in gold and all these things. You have even Judith, for example. They've worked, and even Esther. They've actually had to they've done righteous deeds by putting on goodly apparel. So there's nothing really wrong with it, but it's saying that don't let the manner in which you attract men be just because of this. It has to be coupled with the fear, the conversation. It has to be your character. All right. Beauty is good, but when there's nothing behind beauty, it's hated, right? People, a lot of beautiful women get into trouble with people just because of their nasty attitude, and sometimes the trouble is so great that they end up even perishing. Okay, so the character is most important. All right, so that's why I'm saying that your conversations, or in other words, how you move to attract people, or your personality, shouldn't be just outwardly. So verse 4 says, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. For after this manner in the old times the holy women also, who trusted in God, adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husband. Okay, so now there's a comparison. Who do you look up to, right? The men, we look up to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But for the women, there are holy women also in the scriptures who you ought to look up to, right? And it says, verse 6 says, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well and are not afraid with any amazement, right? So, yeah, shows you here that Sarah was obedient, she was submissive, and she was blessed with bringing forth what the promise. I guess the one who held the promise, which is a blessing in itself. And even Leah, right? It tells you that Leah was very spiritual, right? She was not desired physically by Jacob, unlike her sister, but because of how she prayed to the Lord and how submissive she was to her husband, she has a lot more. A lot of the tribes really came from her side, and even I guess according to scriptures, the ones who played the most important role in the scriptures were really came from her, right? Which is Judah and Levi. Levites really had a spiritual role. A lot of the spiritual well-being of the nation was carried out by Levites, and you have the kingdom, right, being administrated by the tribe of Judah. So you had all this going on there. Okay, so it says, likewise, ye husband, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife and unto the weak as unto the weaker vessel, right? And in other words, saying, how you would handle like a glass or anything that is fragile, so too are you supposed to deal with them. And as a man, you really ain't supposed to be out here using your position as a way of suppressing the happiness of your wife, right? Because if she's happy, you're happy. You're not set up to be oppressive. In fact, let me get this precept here. We're gonna have to go through the chapters. Obviously, not Malachi, the first chapter. Let's see. The book of Malachi talks about this. Let me see. It's lucky. I know I read this in here. Yes. So the book of Malachi, chapter 2, verse 14, it says, "And this have ye done again." So let me start from verse 12. It says, "The Lord Yahweh will cut off the man that doeth this, the master and the scholar, out of the tabernacles of Jacob, and him that offereth an offering unto the Lord Yahweh of hosts. And this have ye done again, covering the altar of the Lord Yahweh with tears, with weeping, and with crying out, insomuch that he regardeth not the offering any more, or receive it with good at your hand. Ye say, wherefore?" So, the Lord said that at this point, man, I don't give a damn if you bring, the sacrifices and you cry and you weep and you cry out. He doesn't care, right? And if you ever say, well, what will be the reason? The Lord will say, because the Lord has been witness between thee and the wife of thy youth, against whom thou hast dealt treacherously. Yet she is thy companion and the wife of thy covenant. And did not he make one? Yet had he the residue of the Spirit. Let me see. Yes. And wherefore one, that he might seek a godly seed. Therefore take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously against the wife of his youth. Okay, so I'm applying this literally, and that's why even Yahushua said that if you put your wife away for anything other than adultery, right, you're causing her to go off. And a lot of things that happen in ancient days and even in our time is that the men were not giving honor to the women. They were turning them into harlots, right? They were not dealing righteously with them. They would abandon their duties as a husband and a father, and then they will leave the woman out here to go fend for herself. And I mean, a whole bunch, and the destruction of the household, really began with the men. Okay, the whole reason why there's a war between the Israelite men and the Israelite women, it honestly really began with the men, right? And things just spiral out of control, and the women just they just they have the mindset of, if wickedness is what it is, and then I'm gonna be wicked too. So everybody's just being wicked and going off and yada yada yada, and this has it has trickled down to the next generation and the next, and the household of Israel has been waxing worse and worse and worse into what it is today. And so this is why, right, Peter says, likewise, ye husband, deal with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Right? All these they are basic, but the more you go on into this truth, you tend to forget the basics because you think you've grown and that you don't need to go through scriptures like this again. Right? You're worried about breakdowns and prophecies and words, and it's good, right? It's good to be a scholar, but don't forget the very beginning, the foundations. It's the reason you're standing, right? So it says, finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful and courteous, not rendering evil for evil, or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, right? And this is, what, like I stated, this is the downfall of the household of Israel, right? Everyone is rendering evil for evil, right? A woman remembers how her mother was treated by her father, so she said, you know what, f these ninjas, let me go out there and be a boss ass, B, and then they just go out and they blasting the Beyonce music and the Cardi B and so on and so forth, and rendering evil for evil, and then the things just keep spiraling out of control. Okay, so it says, and the same thing with Jake, the whole thing with brother against brother and the black on black crime and so on and so forth. It's all rendering evil for evil, or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that ye are thereunto called, that ye should inherit a blessing. And so this disease or infestation that's going on outside this ministry must not make it its way into the ministry. That's why Yahushua made it be known, that you got to make sure that before you sacrifice unto the Lord or you make an offering, you got to make sure you ain't got no offense against thy brethren. Prepare that before you come here and you start, you approach the Lord. And so in this ministry, if we're working for the Lord and we're proclaiming the name of Yahweh Bashim Yahshai, we got to make sure that we're doing it from a place of love. We're not doing it amongst woes and backstabbers and so on and so forth. That's not a good church, and the Lord is going to break churches like that up, or He's going to curse it, with evil spirits. Right? Like these camps out here that are just complete treachery, man. Adultery, swapping women, and taking a man's, splitting, two people who want love just because they pour rank on you and so on and so forth. All these camps out here doing this ridiculous stuff. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no guile. Let him ensure evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. Yeah, because while we're being told here to suffer patiently or endure with good courage all the evils of this world, it sounds as though we're just going to be doing it by ourselves, but it tells us here that the ears of the Lord is open to our prayers. So we're not just being asked to go out without any protection. Pray to the Lord, and you have faith in the Lord will order your steps. And I, for one, I've been, I know, man. I've been in certain situations. I've heard of certain situations. I've heard of incidents happening in places where I've been, and I'm like, this literally happens like 5 minutes after I left there. Or the things just happen like 5 minutes before you get there. And then, so the Lord orders your steps. We do things, we're being asked to do things that we are capable of doing because the Lord is with us. Verse 13, it says, "And who is he that will harm you if ye be followers of that which is good?" Right? And if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye, and be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled. But sanctify the Lord in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. Okay, this is all very self-explanatory, right? And the reason we're actually able to, walk freely and do the works of the Lord is because we do good, right? We are law-abiding citizens according to the will of the Lord. But if at a certain point, if we must suffer for righteousness' sake, if the law is asking us to be wicked, and for the sake of righteousness, we are, brought into the, place of judgment, we got to understand that we got to just have in mind that we got to tell them why it is that we're doing what we're doing. If they say take the chip, you tell them you ain't taking it, and they ask you, you got to give them a reason, because the scripture says this, that, and the third, and then that's it. It says, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as of evildoers, they may be ashamed that falsely accuse your good conversations in Hamashiach. For it is better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. Yeah. Okay, perfectly said. Everybody's going to suffer one way or another. We are not living in a time where suffering isn't purposed. We're living in the times where the day of the Lord is drawing near, a day of woes, man, darkness and gloominess, a day of travail. Every man is going to feel it. It is better you do it, right? You catch hell now for the well-doing, for the righteousness of Lord, than to catch hell later for the evil. 1 Peter 3:18, "For Hamashiach also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is, 8 souls, were saved by water." Right? And Yahushua has freed us from what? From the shackles of what? Iniquity, the cycle of what? Wickedness, and then death and captivity and so on and so forth. Yahushua has broken all that cycle, and has opened the door for that new covenant. He's brought us into it. And so we only need to what? We only need to wait for the same Spirit that quickened Yahushua in due time to quicken us like he was, so that we shall be like him. All right? So, him being put to death in the flesh, this is a man. A man thought that they could suppress righteousness. But guess what? Because the Spirit is stronger, he was quickened again. He was being made alive again. All right? So, and this is it. This is sometimes, or this is also one of my favorite precepts, because it makes a distinction. Even though the scripture says that the day of the Lord shall be as in the days of Noah, there's a distinction made here. That the same spirits, right, in prison, which were disobedient, right? So metaphorically, spirits in prison, and the prisons will be what? The iniquity. So it says, which sometimes were disobedient. So back in the days of Noah, aside from those 8 souls that were saved, we were being wicked. Okay, unless you're Noah, then you was good. But hey, man, only 8 souls. So it says, which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God awaited in the days of Noah. So even though the day of the Lord is going to be like in the days of Noah, the grace and the mercies of the Lord will be greater than in the days of Noah. Right? So we are grateful for that. And this is all through Yahushua. So it says, while the ark was a preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water, the like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us, not the putting away of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of good consciousness towards God by the resurrection of Hamashiach. Right? Let's read that in a different translation. And this water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also. Not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a cleaner conscience towards God. Right? It saves you by the resurrection of Hamashiach. Let's see. Yep. Who's gone into heaven and is on the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers being made subject unto him. Right? So, hey man, we follow the footsteps of Yahushua and we will receive all that we seek for. Okay? So, just like he received it. So, this is the book of 1 Peter, 3rd chapter. Lord willing, I hope this is edifying. In closing, I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, the Bahashem Yahushua, Bahashem, Recha Kodash, Shalom Yahweh, Hashem Yahshua, Brakatham to Yahakims and Aquifs that are listening in truth and sincerity. May the blessing of blessing be upon the house. And until next time, Shalom.